You're going to get scurvy. That's the thing we hear most often. We're going to talk about some of the common objections to the carnivore diet here in just a moment. I am semi-retired Bob. Hello everyone. I talk about the carnivore diet, all things related to the carnivore diet, and miscellaneous odds and ends. Today we're going to talk about some common objections because, yesterday we talked about the elevator pitch, so to speak. And now we're going to talk about some of the common objections to the carnivore diet. First, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for stopping by. Consider giving me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Any interaction with the channel helps. Consider subscribing. It's completely free and it does help me get the word out that it's never too late to change your life. 16 months ago, I could barely stand for 2 to 2.5 minutes at a time. Now I'm out here walking every day. And I'm doing a lot of other stuff too, but today I'm showing you the walking. I'm taking a second lap today because if I record 2 videos in one day, I would change my shirt to create the magic of making it seem like it was the next day. But because I'm trying to do 3 or 4 laps around the block today, just to get my steps back up to where they should be, I decided to go ahead and leave this shirt on. But yeah, go ahead and drop down in the comments. Say hi, Bob. Like I said, any interaction with the channel helps, because I'm just out here trying to show you that it's never too late to change your life. For those of you returning to the channel, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. It really does mean an awful lot to me that you choose to spend just a few moments of your day with me. But let's go ahead and get into some of the most common objections. We have to be fairly well educated to teach people when they come after, we've done the elevator pitch and they say something like, what about scurvy? How can you possibly get enough vitamin C if you're not eating fruits and vegetables? Well, as it turns out, we don't need nearly as much vitamin C as the daily recommended allowances say we do. And I learned this from Professor K. The reason the daily recommended allowances of vitamin C are so high is because vitamin C is transported into our cells via the GLUT4 transporter. And if you've been studying anything about the carnivore diet, you will know that the GLUT4 transporter is the same one that transfers glucose into the cell. Well, if our body isn't overrun by excess glucose, we don't need as much vitamin C for our cells to get enough vitamin C. And contrary to popular belief, there is vitamin C in meat. As Professor K said, think of it as 2 fat guys trying to get through a revolving door. The bigger of the 2 fat guys is going to win almost every time. You push the smaller fat guy out of the way and he gets to go through the door. And that's what happens with our vitamin C. The other thing that I would say, here's that fountain I was talking about yesterday. Let me just give you a quick shot of that. It's not on, but I think this would look really neat if I caught it with the fountain running. Maybe they'll turn it on sometime during my laps today. But the other thing that I would say about vitamin C is that if there is no vitamin C in meat, since it only takes about 6 weeks to get and die of scurvy, I would ask you about Richard Rodriguez, a friend of mine, His channel is Charger Mopar. He's been doing Carnivore Diet for 40 years. He should be dead by now. And of course the list of long-term carnivores, not that long, but you know, the 8 to 15 year people. I mean, you know, there's Kelly Hogan, Bart Kay, Dr. Berry, Dr. Chafee, and the list goes on and on and on. All of those people would no longer be with us if there were no vitamin C in meat. So like I said, we have to make sure we're at least partially educated to some of these common objections. One of the next most common objections is, well, you need fiber. You got to have fiber if you're going to, you know, for gut function and going to the restroom and all that stuff. Well, it turns out that's not true either. I would direct you to Dr. Paul Mason, where he talks about a study. And now, granted, it was a small study, but they had a group of people came in with chronic constipation. Chronic idiopathic constipation. Idiopathic meaning the doctors don't know what causes it. That's a fancy medical word for I don't know. So anyway, with this study, they had some of them not change their diet. Well, what do you know? They still had idiopathic constipation. They had some of them eat more fiber, and their symptoms got worse. They had some of them eat less fiber, and their symptoms got better. The other group was a group of people that they told to cut out all fiber. And now again, it was a small study, and it's certainly not a controlled, you know, it's certainly not a randomized controlled trial, because those are done in labs where they lock you in and keep track of stuff. But to a person in the no fiber group, every single one of them completely reversed their idiopathic constipation. It went away. That means they don't have it anymore. So tell me again how fiber is so good for us. I mean, if I recall correctly, back in the late 70s, early 80s, when the obesity epidemic was just getting started, you know, people were just starting to get fat, and their answer to keeping the country from getting fat was to add fiber to foods, because the idea at that time was, well, if we bulk up the foods with undigestible fiber, then people will feel full, but a lot of that food won't get digested because it's fiber. And somehow we went from bulking up the foods to keep people from eating so much to fiber is required in the human diet in just a few short years. I'm not sure how that happened, but that's where we are. So no, fiber also is not required in the human diet. So if you know about the Paul Mason study, you can go watch his videos on it. If you just type into the YouTube search Dr. Paul Mason fiber, you'll find those videos pretty easy. So it's not required. So now we've covered vitamin C and we've covered fiber. And the next one that everybody always wants to talk about, oh, your cholesterol is going to go through the roof eating all that meat. Well, the first thing they're going to want to talk about is your blood work. What's your LDL? And my first answer was, I don't know, and I don't care. There is no proof that LDL, and first off, let's get this straight. There's no such thing as good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. There's just cholesterol. LDL and HDL and all the other little ones are not cholesterol. LDL is low density lipoprotein. Think of it as a submarine that carries the cholesterol around your blood so that it can deliver it to the cells that need it. Just like HDL is high density lipoprotein. It's not cholesterol. It's a transporter that carries the cholesterol around the body. There's no such thing as good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. There's just cholesterol. It's the same molecule. And it's one of the primary building blocks of our cells. So does it really make sense to have a lower cholesterol? In fact, there's a big study. I was going over this study back on January the 4th when I fell. You can go back and watch that video. I go over it in much greater detail there. But basically, it looks like 220 to 260 total cholesterol is the sweet spot for longevity, because this study, it was basically a meta-analysis. And of course it can't do cause and effect because it's not a randomized controlled trial, but they looked at a bunch of studies and they were just looking at one hard endpoint. Is the person living or not? It's really hard to fake whether somebody's alive or not. So they looked at all these things, and I forget what it was. It was like 168 countries and like 300 million years of follow-up, person years. Because basically if you have one person in a study and you follow them for 20 years, that's one person, that's 20 years of follow-up is the way they do those studies. So there was a lot of follow-up. As you can go back and watch that video. Dr. Berry has a couple good videos on it. Paul Mason talks about it a lot. Dr. Paul Mason. And Professor K talks about it quite a bit too. And several others. But back to the main point here. It looks like 220 to 260 or 220 to 240, something like that. But that's the sweet spot for your total cholesterol. Because there weren't a lot of people with a higher number, as you got above that number, the all-cause mortality curve started to trend upwards. But that could be just noise because there's so few people with that high of a total cholesterol. Dave Feldman's currently doing a study on what he calls lean mass hyper-responders. You can go out and find Dave Feldman on YouTube and you'll find out quite a bit about that. Here we're back in front of the house. I'm going to go on back up the block again for just a little bit because I'm not quite done talking for this trip. The interesting part of this study is that as you go below 220 total cholesterol, the curve on all-cause mortality goes way up. And again, it's not proof because it's not a randomized controlled trial. It's nothing you can't repeat. It's not a scientific experiment where you can repeat it and get the same results. But they discovered that as you go lower, your all-cause mortality goes up. Isn't that interesting? And what's the new guidelines? They've done something really stupid. Like, oh, we still have some flowers out here. Hang on just a second. I turn around and show you a little flower bed that's still blooming. There's not many of these left here in Nebraska. You can tell it's getting late in the season, but there's some flowers for you. Now, where was I? Sorry, pretty things. It's like chasing after a squirrel. You know, your dog's out in the yard. Ooh, throw me the ball, throw me the ball. Oh, squirrel. That's what just happened to me there. But yeah, the new guidelines, they're now targeting with these new drugs, trying to get your cholesterol below 100, below 70. That seems like a horrible experiment. Because remember, cholesterol is primary building block for the human. And just like me going down to Texas to start building my homestead, I'm going to need some cement blocks and some gravel and some wood. Where's the sense in saying, oh, well, I want it to be stronger and better, so I'm going to use less of all that stuff? That doesn't make any sense. And neither cholesterol argument. None of that stuff makes sense. So those are the three primary objections you're going to get when you've given your elevator pitch to your friend and your friend wants to know more and he has questions. Those are the primary three questions. If you can think of any other questions that you would like me to cover, just leave those down in the comments. But that's what I've got for you today, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed this quick little video. Don't forget, get out there, be 1% better. Today, tomorrow, every day. Have a great day, folks. We'll see you in the next one.